It makes sense that the Orville feels so much like classic Star Trek when you realize this person was involved. Seth MacFarlane's The Orville has always worn its love for Star Trek on its uniform sleeve. From the sweeping orchestral score to the episodic moral dilemmas, the show often feels more like Star Trek: The Next Generation than many modern Star Trek shows themselves. Fans who grew up on the golden age of Roddenberry-style optimism, filled with hope, diplomacy, and awe at the stars, have often pointed to the Orville as its spiritual successor. And there's a reason for that. While many credit MacFarlane's personal passion as the driving force behind the Orville's Trek-like vibe, and rightly so, there's a name hidden in the show's creative core that provides a much deeper, more literal connection to classic Star Trek: Brannon Braga. Yes, Brannon Braga, the same man who wrote and produced Star Trek: The Next Generation, co-created Star Trek: Voyager, and shaped much of Star Trek: Enterprise, has been quietly working alongside MacFarlane as a key creative force on the Orville since the beginning. Once you realize Braga is involved, the Orville's uncanny resemblance to classic Star Trek makes perfect sense. Braga's Trek legacy is deeply embedded in the Orville. To understand how important Braga is to the Orville's DNA, you first have to appreciate just how deeply embedded he is in the fabric of Star Trek itself. Braga's Trek career began during the third season of The Next Generation, when he joined the writing staff as an intern. He quickly rose through the ranks, co-writing some of the series' most iconic episodes, including the haunting time travel story Cause and Effect and the brilliant series finale All Good Things, often cited as one of the best final episodes in television history. After TNG ended, Braga co-created Voyager alongside Rick Berman and served as its showrunner during its later seasons. He was also a key figure in Star Trek: Enterprise, where he tried sometimes controversially to push Trek in bold, serialized directions. Love him or critique him, Braga's fingerprints are on more Star Trek than almost any other single individual outside of Gene Roddenberry himself. He understands not just the lore, but the tone, structure, and heart of what made the franchise work for decades. Now imagine bringing that legacy into a new show with fresh comedic energy and a modern lens. That's exactly what the Orville did by making Braga one of its executive producers and frequent directors and writers. Classic Trek storytelling, modern vibe. Many fans were caught off guard by the Orville's tonal evolution. The series debuted as a quirky, comedic space adventure in 2017. While early episodes leaned heavily into humor, sometimes bordering on Family Guy in space, MacFarlane and Braga quickly steered the show toward more thoughtful, Trek-inspired territory. By the end of its first season, the Orville had quietly transformed into an earnest science fiction drama. Sure, the jokes were still there, but they were tempered by complex moral questions, philosophical musings, and deeply human character arcs. That transformation felt natural, even inevitable, especially once you realize Braga was sitting in the captain's chair right beside MacFarlane. Episodes like Mad Idolatry, in which an alien planet develops a religion based on one of the crew, echo Star Trek's classic Prime Directive debates. Majority Rule, which depicts a society governed by public upvotes and downvotes, is the kind of high-concept social satire TNG once excelled at. Identity, a two-part epic involving the Kaelon turning against the crew, recalls the best of Trek's large-scale emotional stakes and moral gray areas. These aren't just stories inspired by Star Trek. They're written with the same tools and sensibilities that shaped The Next Generation, because Braga helped write both. Braga plus MacFarlane, a perfect symbiosis. What makes the Braga-MacFarlane creative pairing so effective is how they balance each other's strengths. MacFarlane brings heart, humor, and a love for the Trek legacy from a fan's perspective. Braga brings the structure, tone, and craftsmanship of someone who lived and breathed that universe for over a decade. Together, they've created something rare in the modern sci-fi TV landscape, a show that dares to be hopeful, intelligent, and kind. In an age of gritty reboots, cynical anti-heroes, and serialized darkness, the Orville dares to ask the big questions about morality, identity, and coexistence with a hopeful glimmer. It's exactly the kind of storytelling Star Trek was built on, especially during the 1990s. And Braga helped set that tone back then, just as he's helping preserve it now. In many ways, the Orville feels like a natural evolution of the next generation, not just in spirit, but in execution. That's no accident. Reclaiming Roddenberry's vision. One of the more poignant things about Braga's involvement in the Orville is the way it allowed him to return to a more idealistic form of sci-fi storytelling. During his later Trek years, especially on Enterprise, Braga often faced criticism for pushing the franchise toward darker, more serialized storytelling. That shift was partly a reaction to audience demands, partly studio pressure, and partly creative burnout from years of trying to keep Trek fresh. But with the Orville, Braga has had the chance to go back to basics. No longer constrained by the expectations of the Star Trek brand or the weight of canon, he's free to explore the kinds of stories that first made him fall in love with the genre. And with McFarlane's support and Hulu's creative freedom in later seasons, Braga has helped craft a new universe that captures Roddenberry's utopian vision better than many official Trek shows do today. This return to optimistic, exploratory sci-fi isn't just nostalgic, it's subversive. In today's TV landscape, hope is a radical act. Directing the future of sci-fi, Braga hasn't just shaped the Orville behind the scenes, he's directed some of its most pivotal and visually striking episodes. His background in classic Trek direction is evident in the show's pacing, visual composition, and focus on character-driven drama. Episodes like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which explores alternate timelines and character choices, feel straight out of the next generation's philosophical playbook. Braga's directorial style, measured, dramatic, often quiet, isn't flashy, but it's effective. He knows when to linger on a character's expression or pause the action for a heartfelt moment. That sense of rhythm is crucial to making sci-fi feel human. Even the Orville's aesthetics, its lighting, its bridge layout, its pacing, echo TNG's classic style. While modern Trek shows like Discovery and Picard favor fast cuts, dynamic camera movement, and darker palettes, the Orville opts for bright sets, ensemble dialogue scenes, and long takes. That's not accidental. It's Braga playing the long game, reminding viewers of the old ways and why they worked. Legacy in action. Brannon Braga's involvement in the Orville isn't just a footnote, it's the show's beating heart. His creative fingerprints are all over its tone, stories, and structure. And his partnership with McFarlane has resurrected a form of sci-fi that had, for a time, faded from mainstream TV. That's not to diminish the rest of the Orville's creative team. Many writers, designers, and actors contribute to its magic, but Braga's role is pivotal. He's not just a veteran writer, he's a Trek architect. And with the Orville, he's built a new home for the ideals that made Star Trek great. In fact, one could argue that the Orville is the Trek show Braga always wanted to make but never could under CBS and Paramount's oversight. Free from canon constraints and franchise politics, he's helped build a world where characters can explore not just space,